All right, I'm back. I'm back. It's been a while. It's been a couple months, but it's a new school year, and I'm feeling finally kind of getting my feet under me and getting a bit of a rhythm in the school year. And I want to make recording these videos a little bit more consistent. So I'm back. For those of you who are new here, this is a revision channel, right? This whole series is meant to be revision. I'm not trying to teach this to you from the ground up. I'm not trying to give you the most detailed overview of this stuff. This is meant for people who have heard this stuff once or twice before, maybe did a couple readings on it, and now you're ready to start reviewing, right? I know at the time I'm making this video, the IB exam is not for quite some time, but it never hurts to start early. So let's get into it. This is right where I left off at the end of last year when I kind of ran out of time and the IB exams were happening. So I kind of stopped making videos, and then through the summer, I didn't make any. Consistency is a new goal of mine. So I want to be more consistent. We're picking up with the Korean War. This is an HL topic. All right, my school does history of the Americas, and the Korean War is a bullet point that somewhat gets asked on the exam. If you're an SL student, I still think there's value in watching a video like this because it's going to help shape your kind of holistic view of what's going on in the time period of the early 1950s. But HL kids, this is speaking directly to you, right? So this is the Korean War. This is the United States. The reasons for participation, military developments, diplomatic and political outcomes. So let's hit it. All right. So the reasons for entry. We could do things the easy way or we could do things the hard way, right? I'm going to do things both ways. The easy way is easy. It's Truman, doctrine, and containment. Word association game, right? Anytime you hear Truman doctrine, you need to think of the policy of containment, right? The policy of containment is, in my opinion, the largest U.S. foreign policy shift in our history, right? We went from a relatively isolated country to one that is going to put foreign policy on the forefront of everything that we do. And the policy of containment is saying we're going to stop the spread of communism by any means necessary. And so that is the easy answer, right? Why does America get involved? Containment, right? For an SL student, you should be able to understand that completely. HL student, there is a little bit more nuance to it, right? You have to understand the time period and what's going on domestically in America, and that's where we go to this kind of bottom one right here, right? We're not in McCarthyism yet, but we are starting to lay the foundation for that McCarthy era, and we are in this bubble of the Red Scare, right? You have to understand that Korea starts in 1950, right? So we're after the year 1949, which I'll break down in a second. We are after the Truman Doctrine. We are after the Fulton speech. We are after the Potsdam Conference, right? The idea that the Cold War has started is common knowledge to 90% of Americans at this point in time, right? We know that the superpowers are in confrontation, right? We know the verbiage Cold War is being used. So now we can say that we are in this period of the Red Scare where we've got this kind of fear, this hysteria, this palpable anti-communist energy coming in the United States. So whenever the word communism is thrown overseas in a foreign conflict, the American public pays pretty close attention to it because of that fear and that paranoia, right? Going back to something I just talked about, the year 1949, you have to be able to understand 1949 and its implications to the U.S. foreign policy, the Cold War in general, right? So in 1949, the Soviets are going to detonate their first nuclear bomb. This is going to change the game completely for everybody involved because now the United States does not have its nuclear monopoly anymore, right? Now it cannot set the tone and have the leverage of every single conflict in the Cold War because the Soviets could reciprocate, right? To do something that's going to be down the line, they can't reciprocate on America, right? So it's not apples for apples, but the Soviets do have a nuclear bomb and they could reciprocate somewhere. 1949, we've got the Berlin crisis and kind of the aftermath of the first Berlin crisis and the Berlin airlift and the Berlin blockade and all that stuff. And we've got the forming of NATO, right? So America is so focused on Eastern Europe in the late 1940s, Eastern and Central Europe, right, Germany included. We're so convinced that the conflict is solely restricted to that area of the world that we don't really pay attention to other areas of the world, and that's another key feature for 1949, and that is China, right? The People's Republic of China is created in 1949. The Chinese Civil War is over when Chiang Kai-shek is going to flee to Taiwan and Mao proclaims the People's Republic of China. Now, internationally, we do not recognize the People's Republic of China for quite some time, but internally, America realizes that it messed up, and it messed up really bad, right? We fumbled the bag a little bit, to use cool kid talk, right? I'm cool, I'm hip. We didn't pay attention, right? We were very focused on Eastern Europe and the Berlin blockade and the Berlin airlift and what was going on there and our new allies in what's going to become known as NATO, and protecting Eastern Europe, protecting it with that containment idea that we forget containment can happen somewhere else. Do we send aid to China? Of course we do, right? We're not completely oblivious to it, but we did not really realize how severe things were over there. So when China falls to communism, the next conflict that bubbles up is Korea, and we want to make sure that we don't repeat the same mistakes and we don't completely neglect an entire area of the world and let communism spread a little bit more, right? So we're able to finagle the word containment and not have it include China, but we know that we can't finagle it again. So containment, 1949, People's Republic of China, it's all tied into why the United States wants to get involved in the Korean conflict. All right, here we go. NSC 68, this is huge, right? Reasons why the United States enters into Korea is because NSC 68 is signed. So NSC 68 is National Security Council 68, and this is going to be the revision, right? This is going to be the first major internal documentation about the status of communism since Kennan's Long Telegram, right? Kennan's Long Telegram, again, word association, Kennan's Long Telegram, dangerous and expansionist, right? That's what we came up with about the Soviet Union, and a lot has happened since then. So we get the Security Council back together to get kind of a new outlook on what the communists are doing here. And one of the things we realize is that the Cold War can happen anywhere at any time, right? So it changes the scope of the Cold War, right? Dean Acheson is quoted in saying that the Cold War becomes a zero-sum game, right? Anything that the Americans take, the Soviets lose. Anything the Soviets take, the Americans lose. That's what zero-sum game means. So what NSC 68 means from a American standpoint is Truman, after World War II, spent a good deal of time of disarming the American military. And we realize that if a ground war breaks out somewhere else, we're not in a position to fight it because we've broken down our military severely after World War II. NSC 68 is the documentation that allows us to rebuild it, right? I think we somewhat like quadruple our defense spending after NSC 68 and start funneling a ton of money back into the military so that we can fight a ground war if need be. All right. Japan also has a big part of this, right? Japan is going to become the U.S.'s, closest ally in Asia after World War II, and we use it as a military base where 100,000 troops are going to be stationed in Japan at any point in time. And we realize that if Korea were to go down in a negative way and South Korea were to fall, that Japan is vulnerable. And then another really close ally that's emerging in Asia, Taiwan, right, where Chiang Kai-shek is. We're not saying the People's Republic of China exists. We're admitting that China is Taiwan still under Chiang Kai-shek. So if Taiwan falls, we have to then respect the People's Republic of China, and we don't want to do that, right? So That's another reason why the U.S. gets involved. It's those other Asian allies that we don't want to see kind of fall to communist ideas, and we're a little bit nervous about that. If Korea falls, they might be next, right? We don't use the term domino theory yet. That's going to be a term that's exclusive to the Vietnam War, but they're still thinking along those lines of domino theory. Like if all of these places begin to topple, it's just going to be a chain event that the United States can't control anymore. All right. Um, Now, the immediate reason for U.S. entry. So, if you don't know from just like the basic SL level, the Korean conflict, the Korean Civil War, whatever you want to call it, is going to break out when North Korea is going to invade South Korea. All right. So, the North Koreans are the clear cut aggressors in the Korean conflict, the Korean Civil War. Right. Um, America gets involved by using the United Nations. All right. Truman is going to approach the Security Council and ask for a resolution to come to the aid of South Korea in this time of need. Coincidentally, right, the Soviets aren't there. All right, the Soviets are protesting the Security Council because of the UN's refusal to accept the People's Republic of China and give them their rightful seat. So the Soviets aren't there to veto this. Truman knows that, so he goes ahead and delivers this ask for the resolution, and the resolution passes. From a U.S. standpoint, from an HL standpoint, I think this is a little bit outside of the papers that you'll write themselves, but Truman knows that he's not going to get a declaration of war in Korea. He knows that the American people don't want to go back to war that shortly after World War II, and he knows that they're not going to go to war in an Asian country because of everything that just transpired after World War II in Asian countries. So really the only hope he has here is not a congressional declaration of war, it's a UN declaration of war, which is exactly what happened. So this resolution is passed, and the United States is going to assemble forces to go overseas and help fight the Korean conflict in terms of containment. Right? You got to do this. Right? You have to do that for containment. Some historiography to throw at you. If you're an orthodox historian, you are saying the United States got involved in Korea to fight communist expansion and aggression. If you're a revisionist historian, you're going to say the United States was motivated by economic imperialism. That this is a little bit more about, that idea of a zero-sum game. If the Soviets continue to get trade allies, that's less trade, less markets the United States can compete in. If you're a post-revisionist, this is my boy John Lewis Gaddis. American intention was to respond to a communist challenge to the entire structure of post-war collective security. America knew that if it goes out and says containment, and we're all about containment, and we don't want communism to spread, and we keep losing states to communism, that no one's going to take the idea of containment seriously, and everything is going to fall by the wayside from a United States perspective. So they have to get involved here. They can't lose another country like they just lost Asia. They were victorious in Berlin, but that is small in comparison to what might be happening in Asia. And from a Truman perspective, we can't let the UN down, right? That this is going to be the first time after World War II where you've got a country that might be invaded in a clear-cut act of aggression. The UN can't fall. We know what happened to the League of Nations. We know how that fell by the wayside. We need to support the United Nations. So that's a little historiography for you. The UN at war. All right, some of the positives here. 15 nations are going to send aid. Douglas MacArthur from the United States is going to be the the commander of the UN forces. I almost said Supreme Allied Commander. That's a World War II term. The U.S. is going to send something like 90% of the troops in the Korean conflict are going to be American, right, for the United States of America. So in the South, you've got UN forces. You do have some British. You do have some Canadian. You do have some UN forces, but it's mostly people from the People's Republic of Korea and the United States. Okay. The negatives from an American perspective is Latin America is kind of completely uninvolved here, right? So this is not, the UN does not rely on the Americas very much. Canada does get involved, but South and Latin America do not, or South and Central America do not. McCarthy, yeah, he kind of loses the plot a little bit in Korea, right? So kind of paints American foreign policy, paints American beliefs and ideals in a little bit of a negative way. And the U.S. is going to clearly emerge as the leader of the UN, and they're not really listening to the UN because they're setting UN agendas. Domestic effects on the United States. Um, we spent a lot of money, right? We spent a lot of money in the Korean War. We spent a lot of money on NSC 68, and it's really going to throw off the spending of the U.S. budget. Spoiler alert for something that's going to come next. Dwight D. Eisenhower in his new look, he's going to want a balanced budget. He is going to try to make some corrections to what the Truman administration did in Korea. Um, the United States is going to learn domestically that if it says, hey, we're going to war for communism and we're going to fight communism in places that most Americans can't even point to on a map, not going to go very well. So the U.S. knows that it kind of got away with one, with this being a UN conflict, knowing that the next time it might not be a UN conflict and the U.S. population is not really going to support a war here, right? Um, cool. I'm going to go to this really quick. So this is kind of the military map of the Korean War. All right, so if you look over at this first image over here, all right, this is Korea prior to the aggression, right? This is prior to North Korea kind of getting involved. This is phase 2. The North Koreans are really successful in their first assaults in South Korea. Um, the U.S. does not have many troops stationed in South Korea. Most of its troops are from Japan. So when all of this goes down, we've got to send some troops in. This right here, this blue outline, that's all that's left of South Korea by September 14th of 1950. That's called the Pusan or Busan Perimeter. You can kind of refer to it as either one. Um, that's where U.S. and UN forces are going to be. That's where they're going to retreat to. That's where they're going to be surrounded by the North Korean forces. It's not going to go very well. All right, you can read some diaries and excerpts of Marines who are in the Pusan perimeter, and it's not good. All right, they are getting their butts kicked, and they're getting their butts kicked really bad. Douglas MacArthur comes up with a really innovative strategy around November of 1950, and that's called the Incheon Landing. All right, this is Incheon right here. He's essentially going to have an amphibious invasion, something the Americans got really good at in World War II, and he's going to invade Incheon and cut the North Korean supply lines, cut the North Korean forces in half. And that's going to essentially preserve South Korea. They're going to be able to recapture the capital shortly after. And now this is where it gets a little bit controversial and confusing. If you notice, the blue goes north, all right? Again, the UN resolution here was to protect South Korean sovereignty, not to invade North Korea. And MacArthur is going to invade North Korea with the UN forces, and this gets into a little bit of gray area, all right? This gets into the UN saying, all right, what is the U.S. real motives here? Was this a war for containment, or are they trying to take over North Korea? McCarthy missteps a little bit, and he gets real close to this line right here. That's the Yalu River. On the other side of the Yalu River, Mao had 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, who knows how many million Chinese soldiers stationed there waiting for the United States to come too far. And once the United States came too far, guess what? China's going to get involved in the Korean conflict, and they're going to send hundreds of thousands of troops south of the Yalu River into North Korea to get involved in the fight themselves. The North Korean and Chinese military are going to dominate after this kind of huge influx of Chinese energy. And the fighting is going to kind of remain around the 38th parallel for a while. The South Korean capital gets captured and recaptured and captured and recaptured a couple times until essentially a new change in energy is going to come. And that change in energy is going to be, I don't have it here, do I? Yeah, right here. The Eisenhower campaign. So Eisenhower is going to run for president, and he is going to say, I'm going to end the Korean War and I'm going to pull out of the Korean War. And that's essentially one of the main reasons that he wins the election here. So once Eisenhower starts to transition into the presidency, the Korean War kind of tensions are going to resolve themselves, and essentially the peace accords are going to be signed in 1953. That creates a DMZ along the 38th parallel. This is right along almost the exact same lines that were the original borders of the country. That DMZ is still going to be into effect today, where you've got this demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. Um, the Truman administration is going to get looked at pretty bad for what happens in Korea, right? From both the UN and an international perspective, McCarthy wants to drop nukes on China. It gets really shady there for a little bit of time. I realize this video is already 20 minutes long, so I've waffled for way too long here. The Korean War in America. Hopefully that helps review a little bit of the, again, let's go back to our handy dandy guide here. Let's see what we've done. Reasons for participation, I think, are pretty clear. The military developments, Busan perimeter, Incheon landing, those are two really big ones. The Incheon landing is pivotal in understanding the Korean War. And again, those kind of four phases, Yalu River, if you could throw that into your military development, I think you'll be good. The diplomatic and political outcomes, Truman administration out, Eisenhower administration in. Eisenhower's new look is something that we'll talk about probably next time or in a couple videos from now. But again, hopefully that was good. It's good to be back. I'm going to try to be more consistent. If you guys got questions or you need me to dig into those diplomatic and political outcomes a little bit more in another video, let me know and I'll do that. But again, welcome back to the revision series. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and I'll catch you guys next time. Good luck reviewing.